President Roch Kabore has condemned the terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso, calling it despicable. Workers in Kenya ignore calls by the opposition to stay home. And later, Ethiopians promote their long-standing tradition of basketry and bookbinding. And welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We start with the look at stories that made headlines over the weekend.
Gunfire rang out at a restaurant in Burkina Faso's capital late on Sunday, with soldiers surrounding the venue after gunmen opened fire on customers, killing at least 17 people and wounding 8 more. Emergency crews rushed to the scene as the army sealed off the city center, warning people to avoid the area. It's not clear at the moment who was behind the killing, but Burkina Faso has been the target of deadly attacks like these in the past. In January 2016, 30 people were killed when gunmen struck a restaurant in the capital. That attack claimed by Al-Qaeda, showing the growing reach of jihadists across the region. Elsewhere, Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga on Sunday called for a strike to support his claim to the presidency, and accuses the ruling party of spilling the blood of innocent people, despite growing pressure on him to concede election defeat. The Election Commission on Friday declared incumbent Uhuru Kenyatta winner of the presidential poll by 1.4 million votes. International observers said the election was largely fair, but Odinga disputes the results, saying it was rigged. He has not provided documentary evidence. That rally, Odinga's first public speech since Thursday, was an undisputable message that he has no intention of renouncing his claim to be the winner of Tuesday's vote, despite calls from the international community for him to concede. Finally, in a presidential statement on Saturday, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari feels ready to return home from medical leave in Britain and is awaiting his doctor's permission. Video released by the presidency shows the president standing outdoors while holding a large "Get Well Soon" card with a handful of officials around him in a leafy residential area. The 74-year-old president had already been in London from January to March for sick leave before returning to Britain in May for further treatment.
Well, most of these stories are still making headlines, and we'll have more on them later on in the program. Before then, dozens of people have been trapped after a mudslide took over their homes near Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown. A hillside in the Regent area collapsed following heavy rains, leaving many houses completely covered in mud. Those on the ground say many people may have been asleep when the mudslide occurred. Officials say it's too early to give any estimate of the casualty numbers. Images posted on social media showed people wading through streets waist deep in muddy water. Emergency services are at this scene trying to rescue those trapped in their homes. Flooding is not unusual in Sierra Leone, where unsafe housing is regularly swept away by heavy rains. Burkina President Roch Kabore has condemned the killings of not less than 20 people by terrorists at a restaurant on Kwame Nkrumah Avenue, a busy area of Ouagadougou, the capital city. He calls the attack despicable and cowardly. President Emmanuel Macron of France has also condemned the attack, in which one French national is thought to have been killed. Eyewitnesses say gunmen opened fire on customers seated outside the Aziz Istanbul, a Turkish restaurant popular with foreigners. The attack is now over, with the 2 assailants also killed by security forces. An inquiry has been opened into the incident. Members of the Concerned Nigerians group, which is seeking the return of President Muhammadu Buhari to the country or his resignation, have continued their sit-out protest at the Unity Fountain in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital territory. The group resumed its 7th day of protest this morning. Meanwhile, the pro-Buhari group members also gathered in their numbers at the same venue. Last week, the rival groups confronted each other on the streets of the Federal Capital Territory over President Buhari's continued absence from the country. It took the intervention of the police to prevent a full-scale clash between them. While the concerned Nigerians want the Senate to raise a medical panel to establish the true status of the president's health, the pro-Buhari group insists he has not acted outside the law by handing over to his vice president. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, in Nigeria, has commenced an indefinite nationwide strike. The university lecturers made the announcement after a meeting today in the nation's capital, Abuja. The union is demanding the implementation of the outstanding 2009 agreement and the Memorandum of Understanding of 2013 signed with the federal government. Some of the demands of the union are payment of salaries in fractions, and in some cases, no payments for long periods, non-release of earned academic allowances, non-implementation of the provisions of the 2014 Pension Reform Act with respect to retired professors and their salaries, removal of university staff schools from funding by the federal government, funds for the revitalization of public universities, poor funding of existing state universities, and proliferation of universities by their visitors. ASU President Biodun Obuyemi explains that the members have exhausted all avenues to get government to fully implement their demands.
Our members across the country were getting increasingly frustrated, distracted, and disenchanted. It became evident that their patience had been taxed beyond reasonable limits, and government's insensitivity imposed severe burden on the leadership of ASU. Consequently, based on a nationwide consultation with our members, an emergency meeting of the National Executive Council of ASU rose on Saturday, 12th August 2017, with a resolution to embark on an indefinite strike action starting from Sunday, 13th August 2017. The nationwide action is total and comprehensive. During the strike, there shall be no teaching, no examination, and no attendance of statutory meetings of any kind in any of our branches.
Channels Television is monitoring the compliance rate of that across the country.